I would like to share with you my experience with 3 ghosts or shadow figures from the years 1993 to 1995. I was 6 years old when we moved into what I came to believe was a haunted house. It was a somewhat older house, built in the late 20s according to my mother. It was 3 bedrooms, 1 giant bathroom, a hallway that went in a circle throughout the downstairs connecting all the rooms, and a basement door built into the floor under the stairs. The upstairs was split into 2 big bedrooms. The stairs led right into my parents' room, and from there you could go through the only door into what was my room. The entire downstairs, minus the bathroom, was hardwood floor, whilst the upstairs was some very ugly, albeit new, carpet. When we first moved in, nothing seemed odd about the place. Granted, I was 6 years old and was never really exposed to any horror movies, so thinking that a house was haunted was probably not on my mind. I loved my room. We had moved from a rather small house before, so I wasn't used to having a giant room all to myself, but as the days progressed, I started to hate it. The house was very loud. I would constantly hear footsteps coming from the living room directly below my room. At first I had assumed it was my sister. She was 5 years older than me and had the bedroom on the first floor. That was until I heard her complaining to my mom about all the noise. My mom, of course, gave the house is just settling speech, whatever that means. But for a time it did set my mind at ease. I started to not believe her about a month in. I'm a very light sleeper, and the noises kept me up every night until I would eventually pass out. It started to scare me more and more, so I finally decided to crawl into bed with my parents every night. This decision would end up fucking me up for years to come, even to this day as a 32-year-old. This is when I first encountered them. My parents had a king-sized waterbed. The bed was situated almost in the corner of the room, facing the stairway that opened up into their room. The right side of the bed was open, while the left side of the bed was against the wall, but it was away from the wall just a little bit, so as to create a little walkway. This way my mom didn't have to crawl over my dad to get into or out of bed. This is where I slept, on the bed next to the wall, with my mom and then my dad to the right of me. The first few nights I was in there, nothing of note happened. I attribute this to my lack of sleep from the other room. I felt safe with my parents, so I was finally able to sleep, although I could still hear the noises. Probably about a week or so in, something woke me up. As I was trying to get comfortable to go back to sleep, I saw something move toward the foot of the bed. It was 3 black silhouettes. There was a smaller one, a medium-sized one, and a very tall one. They were walking back and forth in a small, tight oval, over and over again. I was in shock. My first thought was that it was my sister, but then I realized that didn't make sense at all. There were 3 of them, and one of them was much larger than my sister. I watched them, transfixed, for what felt like an hour, but was probably much shorter. Eventually, after walking in that damn oval for so long, the tall one starts to make its way down the little walkway next to the bed, towards me. I started to panic. The only thing I could think of was hiding under the blanket, so I pulled it up over my head and waited. The hand that I thought was going to grab me never came. I finally built up the courage to take a peek, and they were gone. I told my parents about this the next day, and they chalked it up to a nightmare. I knew it wasn't, but it's hard arguing with your parents at that age. I spent the rest of the day terrified about the coming night, and as all days do, it came to an end. I was so scared that I don't even think I fell asleep before they came again. It was an exact repeat of the night before. They walked their walk and the tall one made his way towards me. I hid from him, and they were gone when I finally took my blanket off my face. This continued all throughout the summer. I was getting very little sleep, and I couldn't concentrate on anything because I was dreading the night. Once school started, my lack of sleep began to take its toll. It got so bad my school contacted my parents thinking that something bad was happening at our house. Which it was, but not what they were thinking. The last day I saw the figures was probably 9 months or so in. They came as usual, and they did their walk as usual. The tall one came down the walk as usual, and I covered up. But this time something was different. Why this part changed, I will never know. I've thought about it ever since, but I've never come up with a logical explanation, as if any of this has a logical explanation. When I pulled the cover back from my face this time, the tall man was bent over, with his face a couple of inches away from mine. I lost it. I screamed like I've never screamed before or since. My parents jumped up and turned the lights on, and of course the figures were gone. From that day on, I wouldn't sleep in there. My mom started sleeping with me in my room up until the day we moved. The footsteps continued, but after dealing with what I had seen, the footsteps didn't seem to be that big of a deal anymore. That's my story. I have tried to find out information about the house, but came up with nothing. I have relived this for years, and it still fucks me up to this day. This past summer, I had the misfortune of having to perform pool service work at the H-shaped house that overlooks Arden Road in Denville, New Jersey. After relaying my experiences to a friend about this place, she sent me a link to this sub from a few years back. I am confident that both the original poster, Blue Orion Tiger, and I are referring to the exact same house. This is my experience. It's an overcast day in late June 2019. My coworker and I arrive at the Arden Road house before 1 p.m. The home is not typical for this area in that it's kind of built in a faux Spanish mission / hacienda style you see a lot in Florida. It looks faded and a bit dirty, as though a dingy shadow was permanently cast on the exterior. The interior of the house was cast in the same dirty shadow, but no lights are on. The property is teeming with activity though. Contractors, landscapers, and plumbers are hard at work getting the house ready for the new tenants to move in. Immediately, there was a sense of hostility emanating from all around. Some of the contractors stared us down. Others wouldn't make eye contact at all. No one was smiling or laughing. In fact, they spoke barely audibly to one another. Right off the bat, we were on edge and felt like we had to keep an eye on our tools, but we had a long day ahead of us, and so we headed to the pool. It was an in-ground pool with a side spa that had been sitting full and fetid for a few years, covered only by a child safety net, not an actual pool cover. It was green and full of leaves as could be. We began by hauling a 2 and 3 horsepower pump the 400 feet to the pool, followed by the intake hoses, discharge hoses, then the power washer. It was my job to attach the hoses and find a spot to discharge the water out of the pool. The property's backyard ends in woods, a rock wall, and these small stone mounds, about 5 of them. As I approached the mounds, I got a bad feeling in my stomach. They felt like they had been much bigger at one time, but had been deliberately scattered. I got the feeling I was on desecrated ground, and that pumping water there was a really bad idea. I opted to put the hose in a small creek bed instead. As we began to drain, the new owner showed up and actually helped us the whole time with the job, and what a dirty and exhausting job it was. Every pump we had, both gas-powered and a small electric one for the spa, failed. The electrical outlets on the exterior and even interior of the house that we would use would all fail. One gas pump would finally start to work and then the others would die. The drain process should have taken no more than 25 to 35 minutes. It ended up taking hours. When it was finally time to power wash the pool, the drawstring on the power washer broke, and we had to tie a string around the starting mechanism to get it going. The power washer, too, would intermittently die out or just not perform normally. The homeowner threw his hands up in the air at one point and said, "What the hell is going on with your equipment?" I told him, only half-jokingly, that his new home is built on an Indian burial ground and he should take a look at the scattered rock mounds in the back. He gave me a look of total dismissal and mild annoyance. At one point, I had to get something out of the truck when a gentle giant of a plumber approached me and asked if I had any small pieces of PVC to spare. I gave him some and told him of the problems we were having. He went from joking and affable to dead serious when he said, "Brother, I've been here for 2 days now, and I don't want to ever come back here. Something ain't right here, and everything is going wrong for us too. One goddamn thing after another, shit breaking left and right." Unequivocally, this was the hardest, most taxing, back-breaking, and longest day of work I have ever had to endure. My coworker said as much, and he has been in this industry since he was 15. The frustration with the failing equipment was the worst part. It was like the place was cursed, because the pumps and power washer were top of the line and only a few months old. We didn't leave that day until well after 8 p.m., and were reamed out for costing our boss money in lost time. It was miserable. The owner thanked us and tipped us well and sent us on our way. On our way home, we talked about how many things went so wrong for that day for no good reason at all. Now it's late July, and the homeowner and his family have moved in. They have left for vacation though, and they want their pool clean for when they come back. I and a different coworker show up at around 1. It's just us on the scene this time. No one else around. The weather was identical to the first visit, overcast and muggy. As we wheel our vacuum cart past the house, we both stop dead in our tracks at the same time. My hairs raised, and I felt like we were being watched. No, not watched, leered at, by the most sinister force I have ever felt. Imagine a psychotic murderer in a supermax prison menacing any guard that passes by their cell. My coworker, let's call him Ryan, quickly piped up and said, "Bro, do you feel that?" I said I absolutely did. Ryan was an extremely polite, well-mannered, and intelligent young man, but suffered from horrible anxiety on a daily basis. Within minutes of arriving on the property, he was barely able to function. Whatever was inside this house was getting inside and on top of Ryan's mind. He would try to start setting equipment up, and then freeze and just stare into the house. There were legitimate tears in his eyes 15 minutes in. He was terrified, and it was no mystery as to why. I was getting angrier and angrier by the minute, not at Ryan, but at whatever malicious entity was toying with us. We began to see shadows flutter and jog about inside the house. At one point, we heard a muted but audible thud inside, only to see the chandelier in the main room ever so slightly swaying and spinning, as if it had just been ever so slightly tapped by a hand. We pushed on, and I had Ryan vacuuming the pool with his back turned to the house. I tested the water and did my other tasks, intermittently stopping to take pictures of the house in hopes of capturing anything. No luck with that though. Ryan was always very methodical and efficient when he cleaned a pool. He was a bit of a perfectionist. This day, he looked at me with a countenance I have only ever seen in pictures from trauma survivors, and whimpered, "Can we please get out of here as soon as possible?" I could barely recognize him. We did what we had to do, and then rushed cleaning up and putting things away. I was walking to our truck past the side of the house that has basement windows. These windows were screened, and the basement was close to pitch black with only very little sun coming in for light. But amidst the darkness, a figure so much blacker and more solid than anything else clearly stood out. It was a human form, but it was crouching on the balls of its feet, swaying and bouncing up and down just a little bit. I stopped several times and made sure it wasn't my reflection or an optical illusion. Any time I moved, this thing would change positions. It would jump to another window to track and follow me. It was evident to me that it was playing a game of, I'm over here, now I'm over here. At one point, it finally stood up and waved at me. As dark as it was, I could tell that it was giving me a smile made of pure evil and hatred. I finally lost it and yelled, "What the fuck do you want from us? This isn't your house anymore. Get over it." It didn't stop. On the walk back to the pool from my truck to collect more equipment, it did the same thing but with more intensity. This time its movements were faster and more menacing. It was making it known that it was faster than any person. In the original post that I referenced earlier, the entity was described as being a Rumpelstiltskin-like creature that came down a chimney and laughed into the caretaker's face, albeit in his dream that felt more real than real. That's not a bad description of what I experienced. A malicious, deformed, humanoid figure that lives to toy with people. We finally packed everything up and got the hell out of there. It's an experience I will never forget, but for some reason, I almost want to go back and confront it again. Some of my earliest memories involve intense encounters with shadow people, but nothing was as blatant and in-your-face and outright demonic as this encounter. For most of my childhood, I believed that ghosts were real. The reason I believed this was because of the nightmares I had when I was younger. Nightmares that prevented me from going to the bathroom in the middle of the night, forced me to sleep with a light on constantly, and prevented me from looking down dark hallways and rooms on my way to bed. Truth be told, I didn't experience anything tangible to back my beliefs for a long time, yet I still believed that my house was haunted. Fast forward to age 13. I moved to a new city and into a much newer house. Nothing happened for several years and my fears waned. I slept comfortably for years in one of 3 rooms upstairs. Life events happened and I was forced to switch rooms several times. I moved to another room upstairs across the hall and back again to my original room. Again, no experiences out of the ordinary. Nothing could have prepared me for my next move to the middle of the basement, wide open. It started in high school, about the 10th grade. I slept underneath a window. The seating area, TV, bathroom, and other bedroom were across the big space to my left. A storage space was at the foot of the bed. 2 giant bookcases with a curtain between them, with a fridge and my family heirlooms behind them. One early morning, I had my first experience. My alarm was set for 6 a.m. to Killer Queen. I was awoken to the song, but when I sat up, my best friend was dressed as Freddie Mercury at Live Aid, standing at the foot of my bed singing. Only for a brief moment. I blinked, and then he was gone. The alarm was going off. I laughed it off, and it was just strange to me. Nothing happened again for several weeks. Another night, I was awoken to a chill. I opened my eyes to the dark basement. My eyes panned left, and a tall, black shadow quietly floated its way across the room, passing about 5 feet away, parallel to my bedside, before disappearing behind the bookcase at the foot of my bed. It was hauntingly peaceful and quiet, but the image was vivid. It actually didn't scare me, though. Oddly, I slept peacefully after. But whatever was trying to communicate with me saved its most disturbing and sinister form for last. Several months later, my room orientation changed. I now slept where the seating area was, facing the window I slept underneath. The black shadow now would have moved from right to left instead of the other way. It was December and I wasn't feeling great. I ended up going to bed at about 8 p.m. I was in a state of sleep where you're aware of things going on, but you kind of feel asleep. A little bit of an in-between. I had been in this state of sleep for about 2 hours, fussing, just trying to get some sleep. Something in me told me to sit up. I turned over and sat up to see a moonlight white decomposing face with hollowed out eyes 12 inches from my face. As I stared, horrified, its face continued to rot and disfigure. It was in a crawling position, just staring at me and decomposing. My eyes darted left, and 3 more sat on the couch in front of me, all 3 sitting with one leg crossed over the other, faces white and rotting, twisting and disfiguring. The phenomenon was vivid, but only lasted for a few moments. I blinked, and they were gone. I had curled up into the corner against the wall. Panicked, I fumbled for the TV remote in the dark and turned on the TV to shed light. I didn't sleep down there for 3 days, and when I went back, I never slept comfortably again. I ended up moving from the bedroom in the basement and can't recall experiencing anything since. We've been able to discount any chemical leaks or environmental conditions causing these phenomena. No one else in the house has had any of these experiences except me. I never had those experiences in any of the other rooms either. But I still can't look into a dark room to this very day. I have previously shared a story about a home I lived in where I had some experiences with a Ouija board, but before I moved to that house, I lived in a home the next town over in Milwaukie, Oregon. I had permanently moved in with my dad and stepmom when I was 12, right before we moved to the other home from the one in Milwaukie. However, I often went to my dad's for visits before that. When we first moved into this particular home, my parents planned to do a lot of remodeling to it, as it was obviously built before the 70s and the inside was pretty ugly. The 2 neighbor kids who me and my brothers ended up making friends with, mostly me because I was closer to their age, would constantly tease us about how our house was the haunted house. You know how it goes. Anyway, the first event that occurred was when my dad was doing something in the crawl space. Our bathroom door was in between 2 linen closet doors on each side of it, and in one of those closets was a crawl space. I was walking into the bathroom and my dad had left the area open while he was still working. And when I looked inside of the crawl space as I passed, I saw an old, raggedy button-down shirt with large orange spots all over it. I thought this was kind of odd, but I didn't really pay much mind. The second thing that I remember is my little brother having an orange Tootsie Pop that he wanted me to save for him one day. I walked into the kitchen and placed it in a baggie and then set it on the counter, and as I was walking out of the kitchen, a dish from the cupboard that was previously closed had somehow fallen out onto the floor and shattered. When I looked up, the cupboard was wide open. Now, in this house, the door to my room would always sway open and almost shut. I slept with my door slightly ajar for a long time as I was afraid of the dark, but as I started to get a little older, I started sleeping with it shut all the way. Whenever I would bring this up to my stepmom, she would always brush it off. "Oh yeah, well, you know, the house isn't level, that's why." But still, it always creeped me the fuck out. The way my bed was set up in that room is it was up against the wall, but right by the door. The head of the bed was on the same wall as the door, and my bed was to the right of it, so I slept relatively close to my door. One night, I was sleeping with the door closed all the way, and laying on my side, facing the door, I saw the handle turn, and my door slowly open. Obviously, I was scared as fuck because I didn't see my dad or my stepmom on the other side of it coming into my room, and when the door was fully open, there was nobody there. I turned over on my other side, facing away from the door, and hid under my covers. I thought maybe that would make it all go away, but I was wrong. Shortly after, I felt like someone got into the bed, as I felt the side of the bed kind of move down and then up, like someone had laid next to me. I laid there literally frozen and couldn't move, even if I wanted to. I was paralyzed with fear, sweating and breathing super heavy. It felt like someone laid against me, like they were spooning me. And then an arm came around me. When I finally got the courage to look, nobody was there. The last thing I remember about the house at the end, that happened shortly before we moved, thank God, I was taking a bath one evening and I was laying back in the bath with my ears and hair under the water, with only my face out of it, floating. Unexpectedly, something pushed and held me under the water, like if someone were to have put their hands on my chest and forehead and shoved me under. I remember a bunch of water going up my nose a little before I guess I intuitively held my breath. I thrashed and thrashed around, but eventually was able to get up. I was coughing and my nose was burning like crazy from the water and soap. I just cried and cried while I grabbed my towel and got the hell out of there and into my room. I freaking hated that house so much. Even after it was remodeled and began to look really cute and way more comfortable, I still hated it. I had told my mother everything that had happened in that house, because I knew she was the only person who would legitimately believe me, and that my dad and stepmom certainly wouldn't have. She's still really the only one who knows all of what I experienced there, and although I never saw any spirits or entities in that home, I sure as fuck felt them. When I was younger, my stepmom told me about how the house she grew up in was haunted. She told me about all kinds of different experiences, including seeing entities, walking through them, seeing hands creep around door frames, hearing voices, and so on. Now, as a kid, I was interested in this sort of thing, so I asked her if we could visit. Her mom still lived there, alone, so we arranged a weekend to go stay over. We arrived, and this house is big. It's a 3-story house with a basement. I think the house dated back to 1920 or something around that time. We went in and everything seemed relatively normal, aside from the immediate sinking feeling I remember as soon as I walked through the doorway. Immediately opposite the front door is the entrance to the basement, which is always kept locked. You may be wondering why her mom lives in this house on her own. Well, it's because her father actually died by his own hand in the basement when she was younger. Anyway, we got in and I went up to my room with my dad. I decided that I had to share with him because I refused to sleep there on my own. Fast forward to that night and I was trying to sleep. I heard something that sounded like a bell ringing, or maybe like somebody tapping a glass with a spoon. It made sense, because the house hosted a wealthy family prior to my stepnan, and around that time they would clang a glass to gain attention at dinner. Either way, it was startling, and I remember my dad was also quite shaken and couldn't explain the experience. The windows were shut. There was no draft. There were no toys on the floor that could have caused the noise, and everyone was asleep. The next day, I ended up going into the basement. It was probably one of the worst experiences of my life. To get into this basement, you have to walk down an old staircase through a narrow, damp corridor, and then you have to literally crawl through a hatch in the wall. Great! Now you're in the labyrinth beneath the house. I say labyrinth, and I mean it. You get in, and there's one big room with narrow, winding corridors leading off to the left. You can't see where they lead to, but you know they're long and somewhere that you really don't want to be going. The lights were dim, but I could see that a damp mist or fog had settled down these corridors and around the corners of the room. My stepmom starts telling me about how she used to come down here with her friends and how they would hear noises coming from those corridors. I suddenly realize how cold the room is. Remember, you can't get out of this room quickly. You have to crawl out. I felt trapped. Your mind starts playing tricks on you. I saw shadows and shapes in the darkness of those maze-like passages, and I knew I wanted to leave. She got out first so that she could help me. As I was crawling out with my back to the basement, I felt something brush past my left leg, and I knew I was being watched. It was horrible. The rest of the day was fairly normal, until that night. I was on the 3rd floor and I needed to get into the living room on the ground floor. There were no lights on. You know that feeling of panic when you turn the lights off downstairs and sprint up the stairs to get into your room? Imagine that, but down 3 flights of stairs across 3 floors. And then imagine feeling like you've walked through someone. I really don't know how to describe that feeling. It's like walking through thick, cold air. Anyway, I sprinted into the living room, out of breath, and settled down with my dad to watch a film. There's a lot more to this story, but that's basically the gist of the Nightmare House. My family moved into a new house in 2011. I was 17 or 18 years old at the time. It's one of the first houses built in town, and it's very old. We found newspapers dating back to events of the Russian Revolution. I must say that the house itself has different extensions built much later, and basically, the oldest wooden part of the house is right in the middle. In that part of the house that we own, or rather, apartment, we have only one wooden room on the 1st floor. When we moved in, I decided to choose that oldest room as my own. I remember feeling like I'm not welcome there from the very first day. I didn't put much thought into it at first, but it quickly got spooky. I remember seeing objects move on their own, a rope crawling on its own underneath my bed while I sat on it, footsteps at night, weird buzzing sounds that I once recorded on camera. Once I witnessed a sheet of paper stealthily crawl from the top surface of the desk to the drawers as I was sitting at it. It was evening, the desk lamp was on, and that didn't even scare me. Rather, it made me indignant, like, what the hell, is this for real? I grabbed that sheet paper from whatever force was holding it, and chuckled. But each day, it got more terrifying. 2 of the worst events that I remember are as follows. The first. It was midnight. I'm in bed, trying to fall asleep. Something's bothering me. I feel eyes on me, but my own eyes are closed. I decided to open them, and I shit you not, there's a floating face of a man right above my bed. Thick eyebrows, angry expression, just a head staring at me, no body. We locked eyes for minutes in silence, and I was too afraid to move. Eventually, I forced myself to rush out of the room. That night, I slept with my mom like I was a 5-year-old again. The second, I was having a dream, and I can't recall the details. All I remember is that I was a kid at around 8 years old, skinny, with a light blue top and dark blue shorts, appeared. I would draw him if I could. Anyway, I suddenly woke up, and I thought to myself, it must be at around 3 a.m. I decided to check my phone to see if I was right, and the moment I flinched, I heard a loud and clear sound of somebody running in the hallway, from my bed toward the hall. Definitely someone small, and I swear it was the boy from my dream. Luckily, I eventually moved to the 2nd floor. It was probably the scariest year of my life. It seems like whatever it is, it deliberately avoids newer parts of the house, and therefore I'm safe. Nobody lives in that room anymore. It's just a guest room now. I want to write about everything that has happened and is happening in my house, even if nobody reads this, even if nobody hears it. I need somewhere to talk about it, because I feel like I'm going crazy. Starting from the beginning. So, way back to when I was 6. I'm 18 now. I had just gone through 6 losses, all when I was 5 years old. All of the people I had lost were very close to me. One of them was my grandmother, paternal. I had to move in with my mother's family. I was always close with my mom. so I was excited to move in. After I moved in, we all started having strange experiences. I'm only able to speak on my own. I would be talking to my sister at night and sit up to find out that she was never really there to begin with, or losing something, only to find it in a totally separate part of the house. Everything was small, at first. When we moved into our own place, it stopped for a while, but when we started visiting the house every weekend, it was like all of the small things followed us to our apartment. My parents went to rehab to get clean, so we wound up moving into the house again. My Aunt Ruth was in charge. Her and her boyfriend were addicted to Oxy. She was awful. She would ground us for 30 days or more at a time, and only let us go outside if we did the tasks that she was supposed to be doing to live there rent-free. She gave a 9-year-old a chainsaw and was like, "Get to work," unsupervised, on the back porch. Yeah. I realize I went a bit off topic, but it's important to the story. I promise. Weird little things started happening as soon as we moved in. We would hear things like footsteps in the attic when nobody else was home. The windows don't open. They're little metal openings in the wall. Nothing can fit through the slots. Or banging in the garage when everybody was in bed. Things got worse after Chris died. I didn't really ever dislike him, but there's nothing anybody could have done. It was about a month or two after my parents moved into the family room. It's downstairs and next to the dining room. You could see into the middle garage, which was a little room in between the garage and the house. They always said they saw a man with long white hair, pacing back and forth, talking to himself, but everything he said was nonsense. No words with actual meaning. Chris had picked up this habit of laying in bed and talking to who everybody, including me, thought was himself. But one day I was sleeping, and it was about 7 p.m., and it was like I had woken up and was moving around, but I had never actually woken up. This woman was walking around. She was so beautiful. She wore this black dress that went to her ankles with black high heels, a pearl necklace, and big, neat curls. She was sitting on the bed, and I knew she wanted me to walk with her. We walked until we got to my aunt's bed where Chris was laying, talking gibberish to himself, and she stood over him and put a hand on my shoulder. She said, "He's going to come with us soon." And I woke up to Ruth arguing with Chris about voices he had apparently been hearing, and of course she assumed it was the drugs. Who wouldn't? He was found hanging in the woods behind the family dry cleaners the next day by his dad. His dad hung himself in the back patch of the same woods that week. After all of that happened, things mostly calmed down. I went to middle school, started 8th grade, and I was struggling with mental health and attempted to take my own life multiple times. I was in and out of hospitals and eventually went to a group home, where I was transferred to a long-term hospital that sent me back home. When I moved back in, everything was different. Usually weird things would happen to us in our house, but I would go to my friend's house for a day after I left, and things that usually happened at my house were happening there, while my house would be fine. The energy here is always heavy. Nobody can relax. My friends refuse to come over because of things that happen to them and their houses when they leave. The biggest and most horrifying things happened this year. The first one was the phone call. My stepdad was sitting on the chair in his bedroom where he was smoking a blunt. He got a call and he put it on speaker so that we could still smoke. But nobody spoke. It was keyboard smashing, and then a woman repeatedly saying her fingertips were cold and she couldn't feel her fingers. Every male in my house has been harassed by some entity. Lately, I feel like I've been targeted. What made me write this and tell my story was an experience from last night. I was in my room and I barely had any clothes on because I had just showered. I was doing my hair in my computer chair with the towel down to keep the chair dry. First, I felt like somebody was behind me. I felt somebody watching me, like they were staring directly at me, if that makes sense. I stood up to light an incense and I started to pray. I swear the towel was being yanked from under me. After I got into bed and shut the lights off, it was about 3:30 in the morning. I was just about to fall asleep when I felt something that was almost like a hand, but was way too big and way too long to have been one, wrap around my knees and push. I started praying while having a panic attack, and finally I ran downstairs, grabbed a Bible and prayed for 20 minutes, and then slept on the couch. Writing about this now, I've heard 3 doors downstairs open and slam. I'm home alone with my stepdad, and he is in his bedroom. I couldn't include every experience that me and my family have had in this house if I tried, but I just wanted to tell my story. My family had just moved out of our very first house in Arizona due to having a small space for the 4 of us siblings. It was myself, my sister, and my 2 brothers. We moved to a nice 4-bedroom home with a huge backyard and lots of living space for all the kids to have fun, have friends over, etc. I was 8 or 9 at the time the day we moved in, so I wasn't much help from my parents carrying in stuff from the moving truck. All I wanted to do was grab stuff from my room, because that's all I cared about at the time. My brothers, who were older than me, wanted to share a room, and my sister and I got our own rooms, which was so nice at first, because I was able to not be annoyed by my brothers while trying to sleep or have friends over. The first item that I had brought into the house was a green silk mesh type lamp that I was in love with for some reason. So I wanted that in my room first, before anything else, to claim which room was mine. I quickly ran inside with my lamp and sprinted to the first room on the left of the hallway, and I knew it was the room for me. It was a perfect size room for activities with friends or even to play with Lego bricks and other toys. I quickly found an outlet in the corner of the room to plug in this magnificent, but ugly now that I think about it, lamp into the wall. As I'm plugging in the lamp, I hear someone whisper behind me, and I thought it was my brother. So I said, "Hold on, I'm fixing my lamp." As I turn around, I see no one behind me. So I quickly get up and look down the hallway and through the rooms, but there's no one to be found. I walk outside to the moving truck, and my whole family is out there sorting stuff around. I asked my brothers if they had come in and said something to me while I was in my room, and they both laughed and said no. I totally thought they were joking, so I left it alone and didn't think anything of it. A couple of weeks pass by, and we are finally fully settled into our new home. Ah, what a relief, doing nothing except make my room look awesome. I hadn't done any exploring of the house, really, because I was too busy making my room perfect. It was finally time to see what cool features this house had for 8 to 9-year-old me. The first thing I noticed was an extra bedroom with wallpapers of Mickey Mouse and Disneyland with an old feel to it. It was a room attached to the carport we had on the side of the house, a tool room connected to it as well. My parents had put all the extra boxes and cleaning supplies in this old, creepy-looking room. I asked my parents, why did my brother share a room if there's one right here? They didn't give me an answer. They told me not to talk about the storage room, and only to go in there to get to the carport. I agreed and moved on. From the laundry room there was the kitchen, and the previous owners had extended the house out another 800 to 900 square feet, with a massive game room next to the dining area and kitchen. From the gaming room was our outside area, covering over a half an acre, with a small little shed or shack in the corner and a tree house that seemed very, very old and run down. On the other side of the game room was a little room with a fireplace. It was great to hang around during the holidays, and next to that was the living room. Overall, it was a huge house to me at the time. I was so happy. I had a lot of room to run and be a stupid little kid. A couple of months passed by, and the family is doing well. I had gone to a new school and met some good friends that actually lived in the same neighborhood as me, so we obviously became best friends since we could easily have sleepovers and whatnot. One night on the weekend, my best friend had slept over. We started off by playing a video game in my room, and he had asked me what was wrong with my closet door. We had investigated it, and it turns out that it had been off-center on the slide, so I fixed it. But while I was in the closet, I had noticed a tiny little door that went to the bottom of my house. I noticed that it was held in with nails, so I barely pulled it and it came right off. My friend had a mini flashlight he liked to carry around, so we used that to look inside. I could see where the bathroom was because I could see the pipes and even the bathtub. It was dark and really, really creepy, and it just had this bad feeling about opening up that little door. It made me get chills down my neck because it just had a different type of atmosphere once I looked inside and used the flashlight to look around. I told my friend to help me put the little door back on so we could get back to having fun and playing games. Little did we know, we had just let something out. We had moved to the game room since we were being loud and didn't want to wake up my parents or my siblings. It was close to midnight. We had a huge television in the game room, so we were just having fun, playing Halo and Call of Duty. Our game room had windows all around it, looking into our backyard. My friend and I were playing games, and all of a sudden we heard tapping on the window. And at first I thought it was my cat messing around with a hanging cord from the blinds. I ignored it. It happened again, but from a different window. My friend had asked me to go get my cat. When we turned around from the couch, my cat was not in the room with us, so we both got a little weird feeling that something wasn't quite right. We ignored it once again. Finally, after hearing it for a third time, we finally went to investigate the house. My friend and I both got up and went to the back of the room to look outside the window through a small crack in the blinds. We had seen nothing at all except a tree, and could maybe barely hit the window with a branch. We debated on whether it was the tree or not for a couple of minutes, but then all of a sudden my friend was frozen. "What's wrong?" I asked. He didn't answer. I kept asking and asking. Finally, he replied, "Look at your shed." And I did. And there I saw two faint, glowing eyes looking right over at us. We both dashed from the window and into the couch. We were frightened, but we didn't want to wake up my parents because we probably would have just gotten in trouble for doing so. We just started coming up with ideas about what it could have possibly been. We had so many ideas, eventually we just let it go and played more games until we passed out. Another couple of months passed with little to no noise or creepy things happening to me. I felt normal for once. Until one night. I was going to sleep in my room, and I usually keep my door open just so my cat can get in, and he had walked right in. I couldn't really see him because he was a black cat and my room was obviously dark, so all I could do was hear him. I heard him walk in and look around like any other cat would do, and then I heard him do something to my closet door. At least, I think it was him to this day. He had opened my closet door just enough to walk inside, and then there was silence. I thought to myself, he's just exploring. It's fine. I slept it off. The next morning I had woken up to my closet door being open almost halfway. I went to close it, but I noticed the little door in the corner of the closet had been taken off and put to the side, as if someone had placed it there. I went to ask my whole family if they had gone into my room last night or this morning, and they all said no. I ignored it once again and tried coming up with dumb ideas as to what it could have been. I put the little door back on and went on with my day. The same thing happened the next night. Cat walks in, opened the closet, silence. The morning, same thing with the little door in the closet. Set up on the side of the wall, with the blackness of the underground of the house completely visible, just sitting there. At this point, I was convinced that it was my brothers messing with me, or my parents working on the house, but both of them denied doing it. At this point, I was scared. I didn't know what was going on. No one else was having these things happen to them, and I felt alone. My best friend had come over again, and this time his mom had dropped him off instead of having him walk. As they both stepped inside of the house, his mother said, "This feels very dark. I can't be in here." As she says this, her car, obviously in the park, starts rolling down the little driveway we have. We all run after it and see that it is still in park. How could that even be possible? She instantly left and never came back. Her son still was my best friend, so it's okay. But that was the first time my parents had thought of something that didn't sound right with the house. They obviously shook it off, though. The rest of the night felt normal and good, since I had my friend over. Of course, all the noises that I heard up to that point were just nonsense. I had totally ignored everything, thinking that it was all a lie. Well, I thought wrong. Another couple of weeks pass, and it feels darker and darker in my house. I no longer feel that it is just my family in this home. I get scared all the time, and I just feel like I had to be next to my parents' side at all times. I thought maybe I should have another friend come over and try to have fun. So, I invited a friend over that was on my football team. He had been dropped off, and we watched movies and played games all night in the living room, because I knew that he would get scared in the game room, knowing from my experience. My brother was on the same team as us, and so he was also friends with him. So we all hung out, and we were having a lot of fun. It was becoming late in the night, so we all decided that we would sleep together in the living room. My parents had brought out air mattresses for one of us to sleep on. I slept on the little couch closest to the kitchen walk area. My brother slept on the air mattress, and our friends had slept on the larger couch on the other side of the room. The room itself was not too big, so we were all basically sleeping close to each other. My friend's couch could touch mine, so there was a gap in the corner of the room with an empty space, and the air mattress was touching both of the couches almost. I think you get an idea of how big this room was. It was late, around 11 p.m. when we finally decided to go to sleep. We finished up whatever movie we were watching and went to bed. My brother and my friend both fell asleep very quickly. About 30 to 45 minutes after we had gone to sleep, I called their names, and neither one of them answered. Of course, I assumed that they were asleep. I was wide awake and could not sleep. While laying there, I heard a little girl crying. She was saying, "Dad, Dad, Dad?" I thought it was my sister. She usually cries due to having migraines. I ignored it and thought it would be resolved. Once again, a couple of minutes later, I heard it once more, only to realize it was getting closer to the living room. I was scared, so I woke up my brother and told him to listen. Of course, right when I woke him up, it stopped. He got mad at me and went back to sleep. It happened a third time, and it was even closer. I thought I was just going crazy, so I ignored it and tried to think of happy things. It kind of helped, and it did make me fall asleep. Randomly, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, wide awake. The room should have been dark, but it was somewhat bright enough to where I could see my brother and my friend as clear as day. And the weird part? They were both awake. I could see their eyes open. We had all woken up at exactly the same time at 3 a.m. without waking each other up. They both were in front of me, so I could see them before they saw me. Eventually, they both realized that they were awake and that I was awake, and they started crying for some reason. I thought, what the hell's going on with them? They were frozen and crying and looking over at me. I asked, what are you guys doing? My brother finally told me, don't move, but look in the corner of the couches, slowly. I was already panicking, and I still get chills telling this story today. I look in between the couches, and there was a girl, probably around 5'1", in a white, old dress, with brown hair, green eyes, a cut-up face, a bruised neck, and a body, glowing, looking right at me. Her eyes were wide open, and her nasty teeth were showing. She was just gazing at me with this disturbed grin on her face, and I was frozen. I couldn't yell or scream or anything. I was completely paralyzed. It was the longest 2 minutes of my life. I would blink and she would still be there on the insides of my eyelids. I was so afraid. Eventually, she just disappeared and we all got up and woke up my parents. We had explained what had happened, and the next morning we had a priest come and bless the house. After we had the priest bless our house, it felt lighter and just in a better mood. I had stopped hearing noises and feeling anxiety and nervousness all the time. I don't know exactly what I saw, but it's still the scariest thing I've ever experienced in my life. I still can't explain some of the things I have seen. I can't puzzle them together either. The one room the priest did not go into was the extra bedroom with the Mickey Mouse wallpaper. Was it on purpose? Could he feel that he couldn't bless that room due to the demonic presence that he couldn't handle? Was it the little girl's room? I'll never know. I never went through that room again, and a couple of years later, we still decided to move out of the house. No one felt safe.